That's My Vinyl Answer interviews are brought to you by Make a Difference with Records. Based in Godalming, Surrey, we sell second-hand records and donate all proceeds to the charity Catalyst, who are best known for their mental health work. You can find out more about us at makeadifferencewithrecords.com. We co-hosted this interview with Nadine Page of The Creative Well. The Creative Well provide professional mental health services to those people in the music business. Parts 1 and 2 are available either in video or audio format on our YouTube channel and audio podcast channel called That's My Vinyl Answer. My name's Anthony from Make a Difference with Records, and I'm here with Nadine Page from The Creative Well, and we're here to interview Amanda Lehmann. Amanda, thank you for making us welcome in your home here in sunny Norfolk. Here it is today.
It is.
So thank you very much indeed. We thought we'd start by taking you back in the mists of time and just talk to you a little bit about, because you're best known obviously for your beautiful singing, your guitar playing and your songwriting, but I gather you were first a classically trained pianist. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, the mists of time, you're quite right. That's going way back. Yes, I've always been into music, and I've always sung, and I when I was at school, I'd play any instrument I could. So whether it was the recorder I learnt, and that's when I learnt to read music. Actually, was playing the recorder, or whether it was playing percussion or whatever. However, I just always wanted to play the piano. I just was so keen to do that. My dad was a violinist, and so there was sort of always music in the house. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of said for a long time I wanted to play the piano, and I think I was about 8 when we got a piano, and it was wonderful. I walked into the room where we put it, and it was just like a whole world opening up.
Yeah,
it was really exciting, and I took piano lessons, and I did some of the grades, but I don't like exams. Who does? But I was all right for a while doing those, but I decided not to do any more. But I kept getting better at it anyway.
Yes.
And it was just a really nice journey with the piano. There was no pressure with it. It was purely for enjoyment. And I learned basically, yes, it was all classical music. That I was learning on it. It was all sight reading. It was music I did for exams, so I had to learn it, in that kind of way. And there were I think one of my favourite pieces to play was the Moonlight Sonata, okay. And those sort of tunes that were a little bit romantic.
Were you able to play by ear, or was it all learnt?
Well, this is the interesting bit, really, because I remember thinking I want to be able to compose music. I started listening to Kate Bush and things like that, and how do you write music? And I remember trying to do that. I was quite young. I was probably, I'm trying to think of how old I was. I was certainly probably about 10 or something, and mm-hmm. Sitting at the piano trying to create a piece of music, and it's like I didn't know where to start. And I did sort of find some chords and melodies, but it was really difficult. And because I was so used to reading music, and learning in that classical format, I couldn't break out of it. And actually with the piano and even the keyboard, I couldn't break out of it for years. Not really. It took quite a long time, even when I was older and was writing music on the guitar, to actually write music on a keyboard or a piano. I mean, now I love it as a composing instrument. It's fantastic, but it did take a while to actually be able to get out of that mindset, and that's a funny thing. Whereas the guitar, I taught myself, and it was a completely different way of functioning with the guitar, and very quickly I was able to start creating my own music with that.
I was just going to ask, actually, when did you start playing the guitar?
The guitar, I think I started picking up the guitar when I was, it was when we lived in the Seaford house. So that was probably about 10, when I started learning the guitar. I'm not quite sure. I know my dad bought me one for my birthday, little old sort of beginners sort of, the classical guitar thing, and that you cannot do bar chords on and that sort of thing, but it was lovely. And I've still got it somewhere in the attic, and it was my guitar, and I used to strum away on that. So I think I was probably around about 10. Wow. Something like that, maybe 9 or 10, yeah.
And then you started your own band in the 80s?
Yes, I think I was about 15 when I did my first performance, and then it was I think I was about 15, actually 15, 16 when I started playing in bands, kind of creating my own band with other musicians I knew at the time, who were again into similar music to me, and we were all very creative together, and they were, a lot of my friends were older than me, so they were already in the music scene, which was great. So I just sort of joined in with that, and I learnt so much as well, being with other musicians who were sort of had already been playing in bands, and just picked things up very, very quickly. I remember my first rehearsal with a live drummer, and that would have been when I was 15, and I had my first guitar. I remember going and hearing, he was a guy called John, he sadly isn't around anymore, but he was really good, really sort of tight drummer, and so we started having a jam, and I picked my guitar up to put it on, and I hadn't put the strap on properly, and it fell off its strap and went bang on the floor, and I remember thinking, don't cry. It was like, my God, it was like all smashed in, and I was what a way to start your very first ever jam with sort of live drums. Anyway, I got over it. I didn't cry. I put it all on and retuned it and carried on.
So you started the band in the 80s, and did that travel through to the 90s? What happened with the band? What type of music?
Okay, so it was a band that sort of morphed, as they so often do, between different personnel, different music styles. So it started off as there were 5 of us, and it was sort of I would say it was more prog rock than anything else, with some rock in it. It was sort of, prog rock, and quite complex music, and that ended up as like a 7-piece band. Which was great. Loads of vocal harmonies, which, as you probably know, I love vocal harmonies.
Yes.
And 2 guitars, which again really enjoy the old twin guitar style, and sort of percussion. So as well as obviously the rhythm section and keyboard. So it was a big sound, and lots going on, and that survived for quite a while, but there were fallouts within the band, as these things often happen. Fleetwood Mac sort of, central, really,
rock and roll.
Wait for the memoirs then.
Absolutely, yes. That would be complicated. So anyway, and then that sort of morphed into another band, and another, and I think that then it settled on a band that was sort of 4 or 5-piece band, depending on who was in it at the time, which was more rock orientated.
Right.
And that was the first band I was in. It was sort of more of a kind of, we shared the writing. It was sort of probably sort of 30% me, 30% the other guitarist, vocalist, that sort of thing. And this one was more sort of my own, just my own stuff. And so that one, it was quite rocky, that, because in Brighton at the time, prog rock wasn't really a thing. It was it was sort of late 80s, early 90s. There wasn't a lot of prog rock around. Well, there was plenty, but it wasn't...
A bit more edgy in Brighton, wasn't it?
It was a bit more edgy. It was either blues funk or it was rock.
Yes.
And and there's a lot of glam rock around at the time. So we sort of geared the band more towards that, because we were doing a lot of gigging with that band. That band was called Big Spanner, which is a bit
Big
of a
Spanner, okay.
Big Spanner. I mean, it was a bit of a daft name really to call it, because it sounded like it was kind of a real thrash band, and it wasn't actually. There's a lot of music in it. It was quite kind of introspective as well as the rock stuff. But anyway, Big Spanner it was.
Okay.
And we toured a lot with that band, all over the place, all of the south coast and up to as far as like Manchester and everywhere. And that was good fun. It was a really good band, and I think that was the last band that I had before I moved up to Norfolk, and that went on for a few years. That one, and we sort of won competitions and things. You know, it was good. It was a good band, and it was a shame when it fell apart. I think the drummer left for his own personal reasons, and I'd got to that point of thinking, I've had enough of this, not music, but this particular band. It was just getting too much to start again, find another drummer, and so I thought no, and that was the time I decided to move. It was so many things had changed in my life at the time. It was time to change for a change, and to relocate, start again, but in a different way. So that was sort of the Brighton days, I think, were my most intensive gigging days of my own music, as it were.
Okay.
So.
And then when did Wazoon come along?
Wazoon. Of course, Wazoon went alongside the latter days of the band. Wazoon involved Eddie Deegan, who's the keyboard player in the latter days of Big Spanner.
Okay, so that was the connection.
And we then created the Wazoon. After the band split up, then we concentrated on the duo and created the Wazoon album. That was just before I moved up here. And that so that was nice. The Wazoon album it's got some of the heavier stuff on it, but it's a bit more, I don't know, it was a bit of a release from having to do stuff for live. It was let's write some stuff that is more kind of just laid back, and you don't have to worry about how would this work live. And that was quite nice to have the freedom to do that as well. So the songs I wrote, there were some that I'd written that we did with the band that were on the Wazoon album, and there was some new material that I wrote, and then there was a lot of input from Eddie as well on some of that music. So it was a really good album to do.
So you mentioned about performing live and obviously having to transform things in a way that are going to work. If we follow your career sequentially, I guess, from a time point of view, and we fast forward a little bit to 2009, 2010. Of course, that's when you start gigging in a serious way with Steve Hackett and his band. How did that come about?
Well, just to fill in the gap, I suppose, it was a funny time because I had my son during sort of the early 2000s. So it was, I think there was a sort of a gap, although I was working with some musicians up in Norfolk. I wasn't doing a bit of gigging. I did a lot of solo stuff. It wasn't such an intensive time for me. So there'd been kind of a gap. And this is a funny thing because it's almost, I think a lot of people think my career started in 2009 because obviously that's what I'm best known for, is the work that I did with and still do with Steve, because I did sort of tour full time with him, and I think it's quite an interesting thing because obviously there was a gap, so there's all this intensive gigging and recording schedule up until sort of the early late 90s, and then obviously, and then I was a single parent as well. So that time, I was very focused on my son. So then I started doing the occasional gigs again when, as my son was sort of getting a little bit older. And just locally, just doing sort of, small venues. And as you know, Steve and Joe, they came to one of my shows. I'm trying to think where it was now. It was a little, oh, I know where it was. It was a little venue. It was a sort of a pub venue nearby here. And they came along to see that I'd known Steve before anyway, but that's
Yeah.
the first time he saw me actually playing something live.
Okay.
And that was interesting because it was a funny old night. It was a venue I'd played before, and they were always really friendly there. But this night, I don't know, there was something in the air, and it was a bit. The audience was a bit heckly and a bit, hard work that night.
Right.
And I just, because I'd come across it before, it's nothing new to me, having done those sort of shows a lot. I just sort of dealt with it and got sort of friendly and a bit of banter and everything,
Yes.
got them on side and
Yeah.
put in some more rockier numbers to get everybody going. And I did things like, I played sort of Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms and things like that as well. So I brought it all right down as well, to a very sort of personal level. And the whole thing kind of worked, and it was a good gig. And we got, when I got to the end of it and I was sort of packing away, and Steve said to me, that was really good. He was really impressed, and he said, I'd find that sort of just, a really hard thing to do just on your own.
Yes.
Actually doing what you did, and he was really impressed with it. And he said to me, on my new album I'm doing, which is Out of the Tunnel's Mouth, he said, would you like to do some backing vocals on it? Because I'd need some backing vocals on some of the tracks. So obviously I said, yeah, I'd love to.
Yes.
So that's how the backing vocal on Out of the Tunnel's Mouth happened.
Okay.
And because I did those, and there was the UK tour coming up, he said to me, would you like to do some of that? It'd be really nice to have those vocals on the tour in the UK. Would you be up for that? Which of course I was. Managed to sort out some arrangements for my son to be looked after, how life on the ground has to get sorted out to make these things happen, and that was fine. My mum and stepdad said that they'll look after him. So brilliant. And then obviously there was some rehearsing to do with Steve, and we then introduced the guitar as well. So so I sort of learned Every Day and Serpentine Song, and there was lots of those sort of wonderful pieces.
Yes.
And it just grew from there. So I did that first tour with Steve and the band, and then it just kept going from there. And I just got more and more sort of involved with the songs and learnt more stuff. And
because he was playing some quite intimate venues on that tour. I remember going to see the Farnham Maltings, which is a lovely venue.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Which I think you were there for, as I remember.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. Yes. It's funny because those smaller venues, there's something really nice about those because you're more in touch with the audience. I think I just love playing live, whether it's playing to one person or whether it's playing to the Albert Hall or whatever it is, everywhere in between, because everywhere you play, every different situation you play has a different positive to it. And I think with those clubs that we played in at that time, they were big enough to get a really good rapport, and they were always full up as well. It wasn't hard to sell tickets. And so you just got such a rapport, and a lot of them were standing gigs as well.
Farnham was, the reason I remember Farnham in particular, it was the first time I'd heard Out of the Tunnel's Mouth tracks played live. Of course, in the days where Steve was playing more of his solo stuff and less of the Genesis stuff. And
that's right.
He did Fire on the Moon, which starts off really quietly, and then suddenly it goes, whoa.
Oh, it does,
and when you're standing about 6 rows back, you're kind of going, wow.
Yes.
Amazing experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shadow the Hierophant Live is one of Steve's, must-play tracks live.
It is,
It's a massive song. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Do you ever get nervous?
I always get nervous. Yes, I always get nervous. I think you have to a little bit before doing a performance. So you have to get it's having the nerves just right. If you get too nervous, obviously it's not a good thing. But if you're kind of almost too laid back, you lose that edge. You have to have a little bit of edge. I think that Shadow of the Hierophant is vocally a track that you have to be in optimum voice for. So there have been times when it's been quite nerve-wracking. I think the last European tour I did, was it that one or the one before? I can't remember. Anyway, and we played in Rome, and I had a bit of a throat, and I was sort of struggling with getting those pure high notes, and it was one of the last gigs of the tour, and I was really, really nervous before doing that one, thinking, oh God, is this going to hold out? Isn't it going to hold out?
Yeah.
And I said to Ben on sound, can you just give me plenty of reverb tonight to carry this? And because I said what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a really delicate version. I'm not going to do the operatic sing out one. I'm going to sort of pare it down and just sing it sort of more kind of vulnerable sort of kind of approach. And it was an amazing, I can't think of the name of the venue now, but it was one of these amazing Roman sort of, arena type of wonderful, beautiful places. And I thought, I don't know what's going to come out of my mouth. I don't know if I can sing this or not, and I really hope I can. So I started singing, and after I'd sung the first line and it came out okay, there was this everyone started sort of cheering, and I thought, what? Somebody walked on stage sort of thing. I thought, what? And I didn't realise they were actually cheering me. They didn't know I had a cough.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was a really emotional experience, because I was so relieved I could sing. I'd been so nervous. And then I got this beautiful, warm, spontaneous response from the audience, probably because they're just glad to see me there and, we're going to get Hierophant. This is brilliant.
Yeah.
And it was just wonderful. It was a really sort of really special moment, that was.
Because there's no hiding place with your vocals on that song, is there?
No, there isn't.
It's a bit like the intro of Firth the Fifth on the piano.
Oh, yes.
Again,
yes,
another one where there's no hiding place and everyone's
No.
going, is it going to be okay?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah,
And your
that's
voice
it.
is stunning.
Oh,
Absolutely
thank you.
stunning on that track.
Thank you.
Do you ever get bored of singing it?
No.
I can't imagine you
that's
do.
a funny thing. You don't get bored. You just love it.
Yeah.
I never get bored of anything really when I'm
Yeah.
playing on stage. Every time it feels different. Every time there's always a bit of, will I get it right? Because you always have that, or not always, but sometimes if you're in a certain frame of mind, you get that little person on your shoulder going, you're going to forget the line. You might know something, you've sung it hundreds and hundreds of times, but there's always one night where you think you're just going to suddenly just have this weird blank out thing, and you're just going to forget the next chord or the next lead lick, or you're going to forget the words. And sometimes you just got that voice in your head that it's just like, stop it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
How do you manage your anxiety?
Well, I think that it's an interesting one, isn't it? Sort of managing anxiety. I mean, I fortunately, touch wood, don't get anxiety for stage on the point that I don't get stage fright. I can get very anxious in advance of a show to the point that it's almost like I don't want to do it. It's that apprehension thing, isn't it? It's that, why am I doing this? This is so nerve-wracking. Why am I doing this? And then you get on stage and that, oh yes, of course, I love it. That's why I'm doing it. It's just a funny sort of thing. So managing anxiety, I have to release, I've rehearsed, I've done what I can, because the worst thing I find that I can do is start doing last minute rehearsal in my head of, now what are those chords, trying to you're almost like going into minutiae and thinking, trying to visualize chords on the guitar or trying to visualize a song, and you like panic yourself and suddenly think, hang on, is it that or is it that, or do I play it there or is it up the neck, and you start tripping yourself up at the last minute, and that's something that I've learned to control, because you just don't go there. You've done your practice, you know the pieces. Yes, you might make an error or two. It's live music. It happens. We all do it. And you try and just avoid that and just kind of keep on a level beforehand. And some days are easier than others. Sometimes it's a funny old thing. Why are you more nervous one day than another? So yes, it's just managing those little things that trip you up, and after a while you get used to what those are for you.
Yeah.
If we move away from the live side for a moment and we talk a bit about the studio work and the songwriting, we're going to talk about Innocence and Illusion in a minute, but just before we get there, on Steve's studio album since 2009, I think your voice has been increasingly prominent. You've been doing more and more tracks on the albums. If you had to pick out 2 or 3 favourites for you, what would you say they'd be?
Oh golly, Oh, well, I'd have to really think about that. I mean, on this current album with the Circus and the Night Whale, I did I think that I really did enjoy singing on Ghost Moon and Living Love, because I got to do that little operatic bit, and that was lovely because Steve really wanted. He had this tune. I think he's explained that it's like a tune he heard when he had been poorly a long time ago, when he had been poorly with, I think, dengue fever or something horrible like that. And he'd always heard this tune, and it was very sort of magical, and I really wanted to be able to represent that tune for him when I sung that bit at the beginning of that song. And that was really special because he was so pleased with it, and that's good because I was able to do that and actually be that voice that he had been hearing. And I enjoyed doing the whole of that song because I think it's a really, really lovely song. Other tunes on his albums, I quite enjoyed doing Purple. I think, was it called Purple Wine or Through the Hungry Years? I think it was called Through the Hungry Years in the end, actually. That was a nice one because there was lots and lots of vocal harmonies, and it was a bit like, I don't know, the Seekers or Peter, Paul and Mary, or that kind of approach. And that was just such a different thing.
I never
to
thought
do.
of it like that, actually, but the harmonies are beautiful on that.
Yes,
but,
yes, they are lovely
on
that. I do very much enjoy working with Steve on the vocals as well, and I mean, some of them I've done here and sent them over.
Yeah.
So I don't sort of do them all in his studio. It just depends on sort of time and convenience, really. But it is always nice when I do go down there, and that it's always nice to sort of thrash things out, because then everybody comes up with ideas, and it becomes a creative melting pot, and it sort of grows on its own, which is nice.
Yeah, particularly the vocal harmonies, you can try various things, and suddenly something will work or something will jar, and you'll just adjust it.
Yes.
It's almost like mixing in some ways.
It is rather, yes. Yeah. Yes, it is. I love harmonies. I love counter harmonies.
Yeah.
It's just, I've just always had a really sense of vocal harmonies and what you can do with them, and just, it's like a kind of having a painting and then just putting the sort of the highlights on it. It's just my favourite bit.
So let's come on and talk about your solo material. Innocence and Illusion. It's been out now, 3 years almost. 2021 it came out. I know time flies. So obviously we talked a bit earlier in the interview about your early period and doing some writing with bands and what have you. But if you leave to one side the EP, is it Shadow, that came out in 2012, we've waited a long time for your first full solo album. What took you so long?
Well, the Shadow EP was actually going to be it was the start of my album, because I wrote all of that music in sort of the late 90s around about, and the millennium time, those 4 tracks, and recorded those at around about that time. And that was going to be, as I say, that was going to be an album. And then, yes, my son came along, and there was all of that phase. So I didn't do, this recording stopped for that time. And then there was the live work with Steve that happened. So again, I was too busy.
Right.
And so it was, okay, I'll release that as an EP, those 4 tracks.
Yeah.
So at least they're getting out there, and there's something, because it was frustrating me that those tracks were just sitting there. So that's why I released the EP.
Right.
Then obviously I've been very busy with touring. And I think with writing an album, for me, I'm not quick at it. I take a long time to write songs. I take a long time to record them, because I chuck out an awful lot of material that I do. And I like it to grow quite organically. I don't like to rush it. And so the other thing is, I do find that it's really, once I'm in recording mode or music creation mode, I find it very hard to switch out of it and do anything else. So I need big chunks of time to work on any kind of solo material. So, as I say, when I was doing a lot of live work, I was very focused on live work and rehearsing up for live work, as I am at the moment with all the solo gigs I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah.
That's taking a lot of energy and time to plumb into that, which I'll get back onto, but excuse me. So I think that, you know, all those kind of life reasons are reasons that things don't happen, because it's difficult to do things alongside, and I think that I had started Innocence and Illusion. I'd recorded Memory Lane and Only Happy When It Rains, sort of in about, I think I recorded those in 2018, I think. So that was the sort of the start of it.
Right.
And then lockdowns happened with the whole sort of COVID era, as we call it now. And during that time, although I was still busy, I had more time. And it was like, it's now or never. This is it. I'm going to do this.
Touring kind of stopped, didn't it?
Touring stopped, so there was no touring.
Yeah.
And there was nothing to rehearse for or to aim for with that. And I still had other work I was doing, but yeah, I had more time, and that's when I really started work on the album as a whole. And that's sort of kind of why it took so long. Yeah.
We'd like to obviously ask you about specific tracks on the album, but first, can I just ask you, did you have any particular theme in mind, either musically or lyrically, when you started?
Well, when I started, I didn't. So it's an album that kind of became its own theme, which is quite nice in a way. I just wrote songs, whatever was in my mind. As with the Wazoon album, for instance, there's no theme to the Wazoon album. There's just a song about this, song about that. You know, there was no sort of continuity with it. Innocence and Illusion started off like that, but as I wrote it, I kind of was feeling, well, this is a bit of a journey. The sort of twists and turns of you know, sort of like a life journey. It certainly wasn't autobiographical, or there's obviously, I think, with most albums, there's an element of that in, because we write from our own experience and our own feelings and thoughts. But it did, it evolved in its own way, and certainly when I started to put it together, and latterly what will work with this album, you know, with the last few tracks that I was doing, I was quite mindful of what would fit in with it. And although musically it's quite varied, there's quite a lot of different styles on there.
Absolutely.
I did try and sort of keep it within a certain theme, which is very much the childlike theme that runs through it, with the sort of the hard-edged realities that kind of crop up in, you know, as you go through life, and that, I think, did give it. As an album, it has a kind of a feel to it, I think. So, yeah.
I think for me, one of the strengths of the album is the actual variety musically.
I'm glad you say that. And it's funny, a lot of people have said that, which was really good, because when I was writing it, and there were, because so many different things, I never liked to be kind of stuck to one sort of genre. And I was a little bit concerned. I thought, is it going to get criticised for this? I thought, oh, well, this is me. This is what I like to do. I think it's what we'll see. You stick it out there, and you don't know what you're going to get back, do you?
No.
And a lot of people have enjoyed that. It's like the thing, oh, it's going to be like this. Oh, okay, it's a bit like that. Oh gosh, where's this come from?
You don't know where it's going to take you next,
That's
which is I think is a strength. And it's nice that you got the piano in on Childhood Delusions.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is it. This is the lovely thing, that now I can compose on the piano.
Yeah.
I do a lot of composing on the keyboards, and so Childhood Delusions was composed solely on the piano.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
yes, it
wow.
was.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful piano work on that.
Thank you. Yes.
Clouds are just clouds, mirage in the sand. The magic of the moment
Yeah, it's it's a lovely song, that one, because it just gets the whole sort of childhood feel.
Yeah.
I did quite a lot of work with Nick Magnus on
Yeah, yeah.
all of the tracks. He engineered them all, and he did keyboards on a lot of them. And
Why Nick?
why Nick?
Yeah.
Well, it started off, I knew Nick anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd done some vocals on his
Yeah.
album,
Yeah.
Catharsis. So we'd already worked together,
Mm-hmm.
and we worked well together. So when I wrote Tinkerbell, well, actually, funny enough, I wrote Tinkerbell ages ago. That's quite an old song.
Mm.
And I thought, right, I want a part of this, the instrumental part. I could hear in my mind what I wanted it to be, and I wanted it to be very orchestral. I thought, well, I could do that on the keyboard,
Yeah.
but I think, it's not really one of my fortes to actually do that style. I haven't got all the samples. I haven't, it's I can think of
Yeah.
people who would do it better than I would. And Nick was one of those people, because I'd heard a track that he did for another album I featured on, which was Harmony for Elephants.
Oh, yes.
And I did
Yeah.
the track We Are
Yeah.
One, and
Yeah.
Nick did a track on that, an instrumental track that was, I can't remember the name of the track, but it was absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
The orchestration, it was gorgeous, and I thought, oh, I'd love that. So I approached him. He said, "Oh yeah, I'd love to." He was really, pleased
Okay.
to do that. So that's what started it, really. What came back from it, because we discussed what I wanted, what I had in my mind. I sketched out some bits of it. And what came back, I was so pleased with.
Yes.
I was like, "Oh, Nick, this is fantastic. This is exactly what I wanted."
Lost love, lost gone. She dreams the world of her own.
And he had done, because I'd just given the acoustic guitar and vocals, and I thought, well, I'll put sort of the keyboards and drums in later. When he had blown me, he'd done that as well. So,
Oh, wow.
the whole track came back, and
Wow.
he put all these lovely bits of mellotron on it, and
So childhood delusions in particular. There's I'm assuming it's a sample, because it sounds like a beautiful live played sax, or
yeah, that's Nick.
That's Nick.
That's Nick, because a lot of people think that's Rob.
It's when you were talking. It's when I looked at the credits, because
Yeah.
I thought it was Rob when I first heard the album, and I
Yes.
looked at the credits and there was no one credited, and I thought, well, it has to be Nick.
Yeah.
Over the rainbow, wish on a star, the winding stream that leads to a
Yes.
And I thought that's a brilliant example of his magic touch, because
He's very clever.
it's got a very lilting feel,
Yeah.
that song.
Yes.
Starting with the piano.
Yeah.
And then that sax is just magical.
It's lovely, isn't it? It's he's very clever, because he just makes things sound so realistic.
Yeah.
It's really, yes. And I mean, like on the Watcher, for instance, I supplied pretty much everything on the Watcher, with all the keyboards, drums, bass, everything. Obviously, the guitars and vocals were mine, and sent it all over to Nick. So it was
Yeah.
kind of a completed track.
Right.
He then took what I'd done and just added bits.
Mm-hmm.
So with the drums, he basically, it's my drum track, but he's put all sorts of other bits in, and he's used different samples to me, because I was just using the Trinity with all its onboard
Yes.
drums, and so
Yeah.
again he's got all the samples.
Had his bag of goodies.
He had his bag of goodies. He knows exactly where to put them, and again with the bass, he's good at making sort of things
Yeah.
sound like a note sliding into another note, and again with the keys, he's got patches that sounded better than the patches I had on board the Trinity, and so it's great because he was able to use what I had given him and sort of make those sound so much.
It's
better.
lovely just hearing you talk about it, because you can hear the passion and excitement in your voice when you're describing that process. It's obviously worked brilliantly well for you.
Yeah, it worked very well, really, really well. So yes, and with Childhood Delusions, same thing. I did it all on the piano.
Yes.
And again, Nick sort of took what I sent over to him and added bits. And it's funny because that song, I always had, the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Oh, yes.
And there's the song Hushabye Mountain.
Yes.
And that's what kind of was in my mind as an atmosphere. Well, Nick added all his sort of the double bass and everything, and with that lovely sax solo. But the atmosphere of it just had Hushabye Mountain. And I said that to him. I said, that's what I wanted. He said, oh yeah, I was hearing Hushabye Mountain when I did it. So without actually having said that, we both had the same idea.
So you mentioned earlier about the risk of being criticised for, rather than sticking to the prog rock side, you ventured into very different styles. And we talked about Childhood Delusions, which is one that's probably in another style. But the one that stands out in the album is Only Happy When It Rains.
Yeah.
Very, very bluesy. How did you get Steve to play the harmonica on that? How did that happen?
Well, that actually, funnily enough, Only Happy When It Rains, we'd already played it live because...
You played it at Trading Boundaries.
Trading Boundaries.
Yes, you did. I saw that. Yeah.
That's
Such
right.
a pretty venue.
It's a lovely venue, isn't
really
it?
lovely.
Trading
Amazing
Boundaries
venue.
is a really
Yeah.
magical venue. I love playing there. And they're so friendly there, and the audience, it's just the whole vibe.
So was that the
Really
genesis of it when you were rehearsing for that? Is that where the harmonica came from? Or?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just a spur of the moment?
Well, I created that song with Trading Boundaries in mind because I'd sung
okay.
Memory Lane there.
Yes.
And I thought, well, it needs just another one to kind of, there's a bit more jolly sort of thing. So I created that one with the idea in mind that Steve could do some harmonica on it, and obviously Rob could do sax. Obviously John Hackett plays there as well,
Yes.
although he stands out at those, but he's obviously welcome to join in, and Roger's sort of giving a bit of jazz piano. And so I thought, that'd be great. So we sort of rehearsed it. When I got down there, we just sort of ran through it, and that worked really well. So we'd already sort of done that, really. So come to record it, obviously Steve already knew it because he played it, so...
Doom and gloom, the curtains drawn to keep the sun away, and soon they're gonna come and take your soul away. Oh, but do cheerily got it right when he said the sky will fall.
And then you co-wrote one track, Where the Small Things Go.
Where the Small Things Go. Now, that was a lockdown one. That was a funny old thing because I know Steve was creating some like little kind of pieces for lockdown. Sorry, someone walking upstairs, it's creaking. Some little pieces for lockdown that he was sort of uploading. I said, I'm happy to sort of... I can't remember how it came about, actually, whether it was my idea or his, I can't remember. But anyway, so he sent over this bit of guitar that sounds a bit like House of the Fawn that he plays, but it isn't House of the Fawn. And
instantly recognisable
it's
as
recognisable
him.
as him.
Spanish guitar style.
Definitely, very much so. And I wrote the words and the melody to it.
Okay.
And sort of fairly crudely mixed it, because at the time I got some better software now, but at the time I was just using GarageBand. And so I sort of mixed it together and that sent it back, and that was just something to upload to give people a bit of sort of like, something new to listen to in lockdown, because that's what a lot of people were doing at the time. So that's what that was created for. So actually we used the same, because I think Steve had played the guitar so beautifully in that, that I said to him, don't worry about reproducing it. I think we can use this, clean it up a bit. I think it'd be fine, even though it was actually recorded on I think it was just recorded on a mobile. And I kept the vocals, and sent it over to Nick, who just sort of cleaned up the sort of you know, sort of sounds and you know, so that the production of it was better, and we used that.
Well, it's a lovely way. It's a lovely end to the album. It's a very sort of peaceful. It's like a closure. It's definitely a closure to that
like
album.
A lullaby, like everything's all right now. It's
Yeah,
like
you can go to sleep and
yes, it's very much a lullaby.
But we want to talk to you a little bit about. There are 2 or 3 songs on the album. One in particular that are very relevant to what we both do. So, as you know, Nadine's organisation works very much in the music industry, supporting artists in the industry on mental health issues of a wide variety. And the charity we work with provides mental health services throughout most of Surrey. And of course there are a number of tracks on the albums which touch on the topic of mental health. And I wanted to ask you about one in particular, which I know is quite personal to you, which is Memory Lane.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that?
Memory Lane is a song that I wrote about my mother's journey through dementia, and obviously anybody that knows about dementia, which is an awful lot of people in one way or another, it's an awful thing, and it's just horrible to watch somebody going through that, from who they are as a person, just sort of disappearing into this sort of mire of confusion and inability to be the person they are, and just watching them disappear. So it was, I wrote it during the time that Mum was ill, and also after she passed away as well. It was sort of, you know, just spanned the whole of that time, and I found it very cathartic to write it. It was one of the ways I could deal with what was going on, to actually assimilate and what was happening, and to actually put my feelings down, because it's very difficult. You get some very conflicting emotions through sort of witnessing a loved one going through dementia or any kind of that kind of mental demise. Once I'd written it, and then certainly once I recorded it, I became aware, and also when I performed it, which I did before I recorded it, I was performing it at Trading Boundaries, I realised that it was like holding hands with other people who had experienced or were experiencing the same thing, and that to me was very special, because it brought home how powerful music can be for mental health, for emotions, for sharing those kind of issues with other people, and how it can help people get through, even if it's just a small thing, just maybe not feeling so alone. And maybe oh gosh, you know, that's how it felt for me. It's cathartic as well, because it sparks off. It might make you feel more emotional, like you watch a sad movie and you cry in the movie, or you feel emotional in the movie. Why does one do that? Why do we do that? Why do we watch something that makes us sad? That seems like an odd thing to do. But I think it actually makes you feel better. It gets those things out of your system for a little bit. It's you relate to the person you're watching on the television, on the film. You relate to the person who's singing to you about these things, or the music you're hearing, And I think that, it can be very healing in that way.
Echoes in an empty dance hall, the garden where you used to play. There's a tune dancing over the airwaves, reminds you of your yesterdays. Reaching for a dream that's just out of frame, and the shadows on the horizon are like silhouettes in the rain. In the land of the lost, are you walking down memory lane? How's it?
I think it connects us, doesn't it, as humans as well.
For sure it does.
And, you know, when we hear you singing that, you know, we feel it, you know, very deeply. And I think that's the reason why I started the Creative Well, because I'm very much into lyrics. And when I listen to lyrics, it's very healing for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, I always say music's my drug of choice. There's music for everything, every kind of emotion.
Yes.
And when I'm listening to the lyrics, I kind of feel, well, that person must have gone through something. Who looks after that person? Because you give us so much. And like you just said, music is very healing.
Yeah.
And so we're being healed, but you have to go through something yourself to be able to produce that. So the reason I wanted to start the Creative Well was to support people like yourself going through whatever you're going through. And it is a cathartic process, but I imagine it's incredibly difficult also.
Yes.
To process those feelings as you're writing.
Yeah.
You know, especially as your mum, you know, you're feeling that on a real soul level, aren't you?
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
And we're all feeling that with you when you're singing that.
Yeah.
We're feeling it too. And I think, it helps to connect us as humans. So thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome, because I'm just so glad to see that that does work. Cause,
it does.
I think, as you say, it is a very connecting thing. And to connect with people, and when I play that song live, I can feel that it's connecting. I have to actually try not to look at people. If I see somebody crying, it'll start me off, and that's never a good thing when you're singing.
No.
It's not when they sing in the movies and like, you know, somebody being emotional, if they're singing in a movie and they make it sound really kind of, but it doesn't work like that. And live, your throat just locks up and you go, you can't sing anymore.
Like you were saying earlier on, you know, when you forget your lines sometimes or whatever. I think that just makes you more human as well. It makes us connect even more. You know, we feel everything.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
I think we're not very good at allowing ourselves sometimes to have those feelings, but you know, we all feel them. So we do.
And again, I think that's just a really important thing to share with music. With things like The Watcher. I mean, that's a lot about mental health, depending on which way what The Watcher means to you. And that's why I like to lead people to sort of make their own mind up on that.
It was nicely ambiguous, I thought, when I looked at the lyrics.
It is ambiguous.
Yes.
I know what it's about for me. But it's amazing the different interpretations of it you get back from people. And I think that, again, you can listen to an ambiguous piece of music and that can mean an awful lot to you.
Yeah.
And it might be completely different from what the person who wrote it was writing about, but it doesn't matter, because you're writing songs for people to make their own. So that's, you know, that becomes their song, that becomes their version of the song, and that's what it's all about. Once it's out there, that's your song now.
But it's funny, I could pick up the ambiguity, which I sensed was a little bit deliberate, but there was an underlying core strength I was picking up from that song, running through it, however you interpret it, which was nice, I thought.
Yeah.
Talk to you, tell you how I feel, flowing jobless soul. Instead of rolling thunder, an ocean kept at bay. This thing I wonder, no, it won't go away.
Yeah.
I was just going to say about the ambiguity as well. What I've started to notice, songs that I thought were one way at a certain point in my life mean something completely different to me as I travel through my life.
That's
and
interesting.
it's really interesting actually, because there's so many songs now I look back from like 30, 40 years ago, and they meant something, to me then, but they mean something completely different now.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes, I hadn't thought about it in that way, but actually you're right.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
They do morph.
They do.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, do you want to tell us a little bit more about other tracks on the album that touch on mental health?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in a funny sense, quite a lot of them do, really, don't they? I mean, the two that stand out are The Watcher and Memory Lane.
Yeah.
Tinkerbell is another one that, although it's a story and there's a character in it, it's. I think that one is certainly about. Well, I think it's about unrequited love. It's a bit of a little sort of love story, but it's also Tinkerbell as a character. She's quite mischievous, she's quite spirited, and yet she's very sad inside. And I think that's why I wanted the instrumental to be as it is, because it's the point where Tinkerbell becomes unhinged. She becomes obsessive. She becomes, what started as sweet, because it's not working out for her, she becomes obsessed, and she then becomes unhinged and sort of, a bit quite like, or, if you take it to an extreme, you could get somebody that could become quite dangerous, or disruptive, or so that's why the whole of the instrumental is getting a bit sort of Tim Burton-esque. It's sort of, you can almost see them sort of like waltzing around this sort of weird sort of dance hall or something, and everything is just getting a little bit beyond it. And then at the end, it just goes into this vulnerability again of Tinkerbell, and it's just, she doesn't really want much, but it's and so I think that again, if you're talking about the subject of love, that can send people onto all sorts of roller coasters. People can behave in chaotic ways, or you can look back on things and think, oh my God, what was that all about? But at the time, it can take over, and I think that again, that for mental health can trigger all sorts of ways and behaviours that we would not necessarily even think we would, that it wouldn't even be who we think we are, So I think emotions are very powerful.
Yeah. The topic of mental health seems to run through the album. That's obviously very important to you. Where did that importance come from? Is it something that's always been there, or did it stem from having gone through that journey with Mum?
It's something that's always been there with me. I've always been interested in mental health. I actually did train as a counsellor back in the late 90s. A lot seemed to happen in the late 90s. And that was a fascinating course. That was very, very interesting, because you get a room full of people and everybody's just different, and you kind of, you know, make judgments on what that person's going to be like because of how they look or dress or behave.
Right.
But once you start talking to people on a sort of a more sort of intimate level, you realise that everyone's got their own story,
Yes.
that everybody has got wounds, and everybody's got hopes and dreams, and it's quite fascinating. You know, we're all so different and so alike depending on which way you look at it, and I just find the human condition fascinating. I think you know, people can be terrible, but they can be amazing, and we're very, very complicated. And I've always been interested in people, and therefore I've always been interested in mental health. And through life you come across all sorts of different issues, either with your own mental health or with the mental health of people who you care about, or people you run into in your life who come and go. And it's a huge subject, and I find it, you know, I find that I do write about it a lot, that the songs I write are generally quite personal, and not necessarily to me, but they're personal in the sense that they are emotional, or they're to do with ideas or thoughts, or what I've come across with people who are writing about maybe somebody, and this is my perception of how they are. So yes, I think that it is a theme that runs through a lot with my writing.
Yeah. As an addictions specialist nurse, I'm quite interested in One Last Spin. So I understand that was written to accompany a gambling documentary.
Yeah, that's right. There was a documentary created called One Last Spin. It's very hard hitting. It's the people just talking incredibly openly about gambling addiction, and I had not really come across it that much. I'd heard about it and seen something on telly about it, but I hadn't really ever thought that much about it because I hadn't run into it. And after talking to a radio presenter about it after an interview I did with her, and she was involved in this, it really opened my eyes to the subject of gambling addiction. And funny enough, for my next album, I've already started, and at that time had already started writing a song about addiction, but it's a song generally about addiction, which you'll hear when I eventually get the album done, which I will. And I've initially thought, because she was keen for me to write a song, and I initially thought, oh, well, maybe that one would work. And then I thought about it. I thought, no, actually, I think I'll write one specially for this. I think that, you know, we'd talked about it, and I did some research. And I thought, yeah, I think this deserves its own song, and I'll call it One Last Spin, so that it's the whole thing sort of fits together. Yeah. And doing the research for that was quite sort of mind-boggling, really. I'm so aware of it now, you know, just the number of adverts you see in sport or on your phone or on the television. It's just, it's all over the place, it's everywhere, and it's 24/7 because it's just so easy to you know, with phones now. It's just there all the time. It's like being in a permanent sweet shop. And it's available now to everybody. You know, there's a lot of women. Generally, in the old days, used to think of it more as a sort of a male-dominated kind of activity. Well, it's not. It's women, and it's youngsters too. Youngsters. It's a terrible thing. So I think that writing the song One Last Spin, I was trying to sort of portray, obviously raise awareness of it as an issue, because I think that's really important to raise awareness, and also to slightly maybe get into the mind of how that must feel to have that particular addiction, how isolating that must feel, with all those feelings of shame and just not telling anyone, because that's one you can really hide. You know, people would not know until it's maybe gone way too far. So it's not something that's obvious. And just trying to portray how difficult that is. And I think people can be judgmental about addictions. particularly ones that maybe don't involve a substance, because you could say, okay, well, that's addictive because they're addicted to a substance, which is perhaps more sort of easy to understand, whereas something like gambling addiction, it's not a substance, it's a brain chemistry, but it's not, so it's all just don't do it sort of thing, don't stop doing it, that's not how it works. So again, that song, One Last Spin, is trying to get across the whole syndrome of just one last spin. And how that is a syndrome,
cycle,
a cycle, yeah.
That's great.
So
Thank you.
You mentioned you've started writing a new album. Where have you got with that? And I know you've got a lot of touring coming up, so I'm just wondering when you're going to find the time to finish it.
Well, I would say that writing it, I've probably written kind of 70% of it anyway.
Right.
Sorry, that weird banging noises. My dog is down there and he's asleep and his tail's going thwack on the floor. So I've written an awful lot of it anyway, like sort of whether that's on paper or sung into my phone or spoken into my phone when I'm out dog walking or whatever. There's tons and tons of stuff there, so it's actually more ready than it would seem. It's finding the time to some big chunks of time to do the recording of it, and I have started recording it, definitely. There's like a couple of tracks that are quite advanced already, but that obviously has got a way to go. And I've been very focused on the live work with the gigging I've been doing. I've also been busy with other work that I do, because us musicians can't easily survive on gigs and albums alone. So we have other work to do, and I've got a really, really big project at the moment that I'm working on that's taking up oodles of time, which is very frustrating because I've got all this material that I've written for this album, and I can't wait to get it down, because it's so exciting and it's overdue now. You know, the album I was expecting to have released it this year. Well, not be still working on it.
So Amanda, you're obviously incredibly busy writing your new album, touring with Steve, but you're also doing a lot of your own touring, your own solo gigs. Can you tell us a bit more about where you're currently performing and what your plans are for more gigs?
I've been very busy with solo gigs, which has been quite exciting. I wasn't intending to do solo gigs, but they kind of happened, which is really nice actually. So they kind of found me, and it's been nice because I've been able to play as well as just doing my own ones. I've also done sort of like double headliners with like John Hackett Band and the Beatrix Players. There's another festival I'm doing on the bank holiday Monday in August, which is the Wokingham Festival. So that should be a good one as well. Wokingham Festival, they've done that one. I think they did that last year. I think it's a fairly new festival. And then other sort of shows in between. So
is that going to be mainly acoustic then, or a mixture?
For me, yes. Obviously, all the other bands are sort of all sorts of mixtures of
your
stuff.
sets.
But for my sets, it's quite interesting, because when I was first asked, actually, the first one I did was Trading Boundaries. It was Michael at Trading Boundaries said, "Would you do a solo gig?" So and I was like, I don't know, solo gig, because I thought of like doing my stuff's orchestrated. It's quite electric. I'm very known for my Red Ibanez. So I thought, well, I don't know about that. I don't know how that would work really. But I went away and I said, well, let me think about it, Michael. So I went away and got my guitar and strummed. I thought, well, things like Tinkerbell I could do. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to get quite interested. I thought, well, I don't know. It'd be quite a challenge to do acoustic versions of all of these songs. So that's what I did. I went ahead and just, some of them were there's a couple that don't work as acoustic versions, like Who Are the Heroes? And that wouldn't work, and Forever Days. But the rest of them, even The Watcher, you can make it work, even though that's a heavy tune. But you just pare right back and then bring it forward and do different things. So it works really well as an acoustic set. And what's nice about it as well is that it's a very intimate set. So you can, because some of it's so quiet, it's very
Yes.
like contacting with the audience, and I like to
Yeah.
talk to the audience a little bit between
Mhm.
tunes, depending on how much time I've got. So it's a really different kind of set to anything I've done before,
Okay.
and it seems to work because I'm getting good feedback. So and that's just a good way of getting all that solo material.
Well, the Trading
out there.
Boundaries gig was special. I thought that was very special. And of course,
Yeah.
you've got two instruments on stage with you. Your voice is a very powerful instrument.
Sure.
So, some acoustic gigs you see, and the voice is a bit pales into the background sometimes.
Okay. Yes.
But
Yes.
I think it balances really nicely
Yes.
with your solo stuff.
Yes.
So,
Yes, it does.
So-
It's yes, it's quite vocally driven.
yeah.
And I've got another guitar as well now, rather than playing on just the acoustic guitar. I've got this is called a Fender Acoustic Sonic, which is great because that's more adaptable as well. It's got a little bit more of the electric guitar about it, so
Okay.
you can sort of do more things with it. And so I've been sort of experimenting more with different sounds to make the whole thing a bit more kind of from an audio point of view,
Yeah.
a little bit more varied as well. So you haven't got
Excellent.
just the sound of acoustic guitar. It's all sorts of different sort of sounds I can bring into it. So yeah, it's they're working really well, and it's nice to be out there doing those solo shows again.
And this time next year, you'll just be playing in your albums live, won't you? Both of them.
Yeah, both of them. I don't know. Well, who knows?
Well, there's a
We'll
challenge
see.
for
There's
you.
a challenge. Thanks for the pressure.
Maybe towards the end of next year.
Yes.
Yeah, well, you'll give you a few months to
Yeah.
get it sorted.
Yes.
Aw.
It will. Yes. Yes. Can't wait. Can't
Yeah.
wait.
If you do get the chance, do go along and have a look. It's a great gig. So
Yeah.
look forward to that.
Lovely. Thank you.
It's probably not the time for me to remind you that you're going on tour pretty much full time from October.
Yes, I know. I shan't be getting any recording done in October, and there's obviously I'm sort of rehearsing towards that as well. So it's juggling for now, and I will be doing what I can of the album. But I
Yeah.
think after that, I think then I will be having to make time.
Yeah.
You can't. Sometimes with life you can't do everything. There aren't enough hours in the day, so you have to make choices.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to look at my schedule and think, well, how am I actually going to make this album work? I'm going to have to make choices. I'm going to have to do less of this for a while and more of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's happening. I've been having expectations that are too high to, oh yes, I'll get all of this done.
Superwoman.
Yeah. Yes, it's just that there aren't enough hours in the day.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very keen to get this recording on
Yeah.
its way and get another album out there.
Have you got the set list yet for the tour?
No, I haven't yet. No, I know
So
some of what's
no,
going to be.
no inside scoops then?
No, I'm afraid
Can we put
not.
it together
Obviously
for you?
There obviously will be some from Lamb in the Genesis set.
Yeah.
Personally, I said the same to Steve when I spoke to him. I said I'd really like to hear more of his solo stuff.
Yeah.
Because 2009 to current day, it's just been an absolute purple patch of brilliant music from my perspective, speaking as a fan now. And I find it really frustrating sometimes it gets squeezed out.
Yeah.
Because I know why, but it would be lovely to hear more of that.
Yes.
So can you put in a word, please?
Yes, I'll put in a word. Yes. Yes, you're not the only one that says that. I think a lot of people want to hear more of that. It's getting the balance right, and I think that now I think it's when they did the Seconds Out tour. Seconds Out is such a long album. I think they really squeezed out the solo music, whereas now I think there's a bit more of a balance again with the two. So there will be a good lot of solo stuff.
Well, that's good.
start
I think
with.
there were literally about 3 tracks of the Seconds Out tour. You played Devil's Cathedral and 2 others, and that was it.
Yeah, it was
So you
pretty
couldn't
much.
fit
It was
anything
very
else
short.
in?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
very short. Yeah, so
Yeah.
hopefully there should be more. But I haven't seen the set list yet,
Oh,
so
okay.
I really must get round
We
to
can help
asking
you.
to see that. Yeah, I'm sure there is
Yeah.
one. But because I think they're doing Europe quite soon. I believe. I think it's end of
July.
June,
July, I think they're kicking
Yeah.
off in
Yes.
mainland Europe, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I was going to do that one, but I couldn't make it work with various other commitments. So.
Yeah.
So you're doing whole tours now versus guest appearances. How did that come about?
Well, I used to do whole tours for the first 2004, 5 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
From 2009, and then when Mum got ill, that was when I had to stop because she and my stepdad had been looking after after my son, and obviously then that all had to change. So that's why I stopped doing the full time, and it was quite a good time to change in a weird way because that's when Genesis Revisited began, and Nad Sylvan came on as well to do all of the lead vocals. So the whole dynamic changed, and that was kind of in a way. A good time I felt to step out. So then now where were we? What was I coming up to? I've lost my thread now. Full time. That's right. Yeah. So yes, then I was just doing guest appearances for all the years, and then I thought, what happens when I do, particularly when I do UK tours, because I only do a few of the shows. People are saying, "Oh, are you going to play such and such a venue?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I'm not doing that one." And and I think the Scottish were getting quite angry with me. Well, you never play up here now, And I'm like, "Oh no, I haven't played in Scotland for ages. It's just the way it's all gone." And so I thought, right, next time there's a tour, I'm going to just make sure that I find out as early as possible and block out that time and do all of the shows. So that's what I did. As soon as I knew when that tour was happening, I sort of made sure that I could do that. Even things like making sure the dog could be looked after for that time. Just things like that. And my son's older now, so that's not a problem anymore. So yes, it was possible to do it, and so therefore yes, I will do the whole of the UK tour, which will be lovely. It'll be really good to play all of those venues, and also I think when you're doing, because I do like sort of 3 or 4 dates, it's frustrating because you just get up to speed, and then that's it. You're not doing anymore. Whereas this, the first 3 shows are always a bit no matter how much you've rehearsed, and then once you start getting into your stride, that's brilliant, and then you can really, really enjoy it. So that's going to be good.
Well, I think everyone's going to be very happy with the news that you're going to be on the full tour. I think I sort of knew that, which made me very happy when I heard it. So we're very much looking forward to that. Obviously looking forward to the new album coming out. And we'll chat more in part 2 about your own musical loves and your musical influences. But for now, Amanda, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was part 1 of a 2-part audio and video podcast brought to you by Make a Difference with Records. Check out our other interviews on our YouTube channel and on our audio podcast channel under That's My Vinyl Answer.